Today's daf is daf Samach Zayin. From now till the end of the Masechta, it's all about Yuchsin. Talks about pedigree, who can marry, who cannot marry, different levels of Yisurim. We did the mission already, but let's do it again quickly just to remind ourselves. The mission is made up of a number of parts. In Yevamos, we already had a number of these arguments, and the mission obviously doesn't really go into arguments, so it sides with one of the opinions there. So let's go through the Mishnah. Case number one. Kol makim sheyesh kedushin ve'ein aveda. If there's a normal kedushin, no aveda, which is the normal kedushin, like Yisrael marrying a Yisraelis. Havlad hoylech achar zochim. Then to work out the tribe, the child goes after the father. Be'ezuz will give an example. Now, when it says kol makim, it's coming to add a few cases. We're not sure what the cases are. But then when it says ve'ezuzu, is coming to say these are the cases and not some others that you might think. So you have a ribui and you have a miyat, and that's what the Gemara is going to discuss. Zu, ve'ezuzu, what example? Kohenes Levia Yisraelis Shaniso, they married, also they married the Kohen V'Levi Yisrael. A Kohen is allowed to marry anybody, any of these three, and so on and so forth. These are all valid kedushin, and therefore the child becomes a Yisrael or a Levi or a Kohen, depending on who the father is. That's case number one. Case number two. The kol makom sheyesh kedushin v'yesher is an aved involved with this kedushin. So obviously the Mishnah cannot be like Rabbi Akiva, because you remember Rabbi Akiva holds that even by a lav, if a kohen marries a grusha, for example, there's no kedushin. Here the Mishnah clearly says by a lav there is kedushin, except there's an aved involved. Then havlad hoylech achar hapogum. Then the child does not go after the father or the mother; it goes after whoever has the greatest pagam, the greatest defect. That's who the child follows. Again, it says kol makom, coming to include things, and then it says ve'ezuzu, coming to exclude things. For example, almana the kohen gadol. Kohen gadol is not allowed to marry an almana, or a grusha v'chalus kohen hedyet. A kohen hedyet is not permitted to marry a divorcee, but the kedusha is effective. They're living in sin, but they need a divorce. So in that case, the kohen gadol himself is not pogum. The kohen does not become a chol. The mother becomes a chol. Mamzer, a chol. But that is because it goes after whoever, in this case, the mother is the chol, it goes after the mother. True, but she's still going to She has also the Isser. She also has the Isser. I think we discussed in Imam Achleg whether she has a direct Isser or the Isser that she's helping someone do an Avera. Yeah, but it's a positive almana, you shouldn't take. So is she part of that? Is she also even Aveda as an Aveda, or she is an Aveda because she is exactly like a favor? Mamzeres and Sinul Yisrael. A Mamzeres or an Sinul to Yisrael. Or Basis Olam Mamzer. So here it makes no difference who the culprit is. Whoever is the one who is the Pagam, that's who the child takes after. Then the sin, that's the nation that tricked Moshe Rabbeinu and Zohar Melech. The Givonim as well, and that's Machlekes is also turning about B'chol Misha Ein Lo Olav Kedusha. So that's case number two. Case number three. B'chol Misha Ein Lo Olav Kedusha. For example, no Kedushin on her. Aval Yesh Lo Kedushin Alachedim. Alachedim Kedushin. Who's that? All your Arayas, for example, your sister. She can marry anybody in the world, but she can't marry you. So there's an Aveda here, and there's no Kedushin between you two, but there's Kedushin to others. Avlad Mamzer. Avlad is Mamzer. Sorry, of course not. No Kedushin. Exactly. But the Vlad is a mamzer. The Vlad is a mamzer. Yeah. Rabbi Shua is the one, if you remember Yevamos, we had different opinions. Ben Tamer is the one who says, Rabbi Akiva, we had Rabbi Sheva Sefer Samoi in Rabbi Akiva who says that even Chayav Ilan mamzer. We had Ben Tamer who said that by only Chayav Krisis and upwards, and had Rabbi Shua said that only Chayav Mrs. Bezin, the child is a mamzer. We most are showing paskin like Ben Tamer. It's interesting. He said who the big of our after he's the one who's the strictest of all. True. He says even the fear of a kibbutz is machlek might be stricter than that. And we'll see more again. We had a few days. We'll have it again now. The Eis is there. What's an example of that? You come in any of the rations of Torah. Then the case number 4 in the mission is the chol misha ein lo alav lo alacheg, which is someone that cannot have kedushin at all. For example, a goy. Then Avlad Kamois will go after the mother. If you remember, we in Yevamos already had, we'll have B'chayris, and we'll have here a Machlekes. If the father is a goy, the mother is a yid, you go after the mother, the child is a yid, and you go after the father, then the child is a goy. Maybe even the child's a mamzer, a yid, a mamzer. The mamzer. The mamzer Yovel Kal Hashem. Hamza Chal. That's allowed. We just said that's well, not according to the Kiddushin is Chal by allowed. The question whether the child is, well, in that case, no question. The child's a mamzer. Adera City. We'll have more later the concept of a mamzer if it's forgotten. Unbelievable concept that if it's forgotten that this person is a mamzer, it disappears. Yeah. We'll talk about it when we get there. Says the Mishnah weiter. The age that we'll be talking about here, the Vlad Shivcha v'Nachis, the son of a child of a Shivcha or Nachis, the child goes after the mother, the child is a goy. And the Gemara later will tell us how do we learn that. Says the Gemara. Kol makom sheyesh kedushin omer Rav Shimon Rav Yochanan klali. Is that a rule? Is that a rule? The chol makom sheyesh kedushin ve'ein aveda havlad hoylech achazocha that the child is zocha. That's a question. Had a ger shenosa mamzeres. Remember that a ger, it says a mamzer lo yove b'kal Hashem, but a ger is not part of kal Hashem because he wasn't born into it. He only came afterwards. So a ger is allowed to marry a mamzeres. If a ger marries a mamzeres, what's the din of this child? The child is a mamzer, which means that you don't go after the father, but go after the mother. You just said in the Mishnah, Klav, a kol mokum. Right? Kol mokum means like this is a rule everywhere. It comes to add even more things than it says in the Mishnah. That's not so. The Eshkedushin ve'ein aveda havlad hoylech pogum. There we said clear case no aveda, and yet the child goes after the pogum. If the mother is the one who's a mamzeres, the child is a mamzer. The time we learned ger shenosa mamzeres havlad mamzer. Rabbi Yasi, the child is a mamzer. On Malay, he said to him, that's the words of Rabbi Yasi. However, not everyone agrees because Rabbi Yehuda holds that a gate is part of Kahal Hashem. The moment he becomes a gate, even though he wasn't born as a Yid, he becomes part of Kahal Hashem. So he's included in the Isad of Ramamza Loyav of Kahal Hashem. And therefore, there's a lav here. And our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda. That's why our Mishnah says where there's no Aveda, the child goes after the father. Where there's an Aveda, for example, a gate marrying Mamzedes, the child does not go after the father. Not a problem. Omalei she answered, who told you the Maslisin Rabbi Yasi? Who told you our Mishnah is Rabbi Yasi? Maslisin, our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehudi. Our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar who says Gela Yisem Mamzedes, he holds a get cannot marry Mamzedes. Yesh Kedushin, Yesh Aveda. So therefore, there is Kedushin because it's a lav, but there's an Aveda here. Perfect. So why doesn't the Mishnah spell it out? It gives examples. The Mishnah gives you examples. Kohen Levi Yisrael marrying a Kohenes and Levi Yisraelis. Give another example. Agesh Nos Mamzeres. Says the Gemara. Tana Kol Makom. Tanya Tana we learned Kol Makom. This is a Sefer Lasui. Sorry, Kol Makom. The Sefer is Lasui. When it says in the Sefer, wherever there's an Aveda, your child goes after the pogum. The word Kol Makom comes to include Agesh Nos Mamzeres. We follow Rabbi Yehuda who holds an Aveda. And the child goes after the pogum. That's one answer. Boys have another answer. So according to this answer, the second kol makom in the Mishnah comes to add a case. We don't hear about the first one, but the second one, the Sefer, where there's an Aveda, Kiddushin and Aveda, comes to add the case according to Rabbi Yehuda, V'ger shenosa mamzeres, which is an Aveda, and the child goes after the pogum. Another answer is that our Mishnah can go according to Rabbi Yasi. So you're going to ask me a question. If it goes according to Rabbi Yasi, the Mishnah said every time there's no Aveda, the child goes after the father. Here, a gay is allowed to marry a mamzeres, and the child goes after the mother. It's a problem. So we're going to answer the second answer. The Tana, and the Tana says Eizoizu, by the Tana saying what is an example, as if to delineate or limit it to these cases. Lemute comes to make an exactly to exclude what? To exclude the case of a Gesh Nos Mamzeres. No Aveda, and yet the child goes after the mother. Okay, so now the Gemara asks a question. The Eizu Suloi. So it seems you're telling me by the Mishnah using the words of Eizu is coming to exclude all other examples. So that's why Gesh Nos Mamzeres is not a problem because that is excluded from the Mishnah. Let me ask a question. I'll give you other examples where there's no Aveda done, and we do go after the father. You just said by the Mishnah saying the words of Eizazu means it's limited only to these three cases, Kohen Levi Yisrael marrying another Kohenes Levi Yisrael. These are the only examples where there's no Aveda and the Kiddushin, and there's proper Kiddushin. The child goes after the father. Let me give you other examples where there's no Aveda and there's a valid Kiddushin, and yet the child goes after the mother. So how? And yet the Mishnah of Eizazu got a problem. For example, if a Chol marries a Bas Yisrael, right? A chol is a lot of married Bas Yisrael. The yesh kedushin, the ein aven. Again, what's the status of this child? He's a chol. This child is a chol. No, but if she's a girl, he's not a kohen. But if she's a girl, can I marry a kohen? Sorry, it's a chol. Yeah, havlad hoilech achar azach. If the girl, she cannot marry a kohen. He is no. So the Mishnah, but Mishnah said the Mishnah completely excludes any other example. Here, I'm giving you another example of a cholol where there's not a chol mefesh allowed to marry Bas Yisrael, and yet the child goes after the pogum, goes after the pogum. Oh, happened to be that. So this some of the Shem have a problem here. Maybe you still go after the father. You're going after the father. If I happen to be pogum, but you're going after the father. So what would happen to the no, so I can't. Sorry. So that's the question. Some of the Shem ask. It's not because you're going after the father. You're going after the pogum, and it happens to be that in this case the pogum is the father. So you're not. So what's the Gemara's question here? That that we're excluding. So the Gemara's question here is, sorry, all the way around. They're asking, what's the Gemara's question? The Gemara's question, here's another example where you go after the father, even, why is the Mishnah included? It's not because you're going after the father, it's because you're going after the pogrom. The next case in the Mishnah was that something after the pogrom. The Mishnah is saying that I'm excluding I'm saying to you when you go after the father. The reason why you're going in this case, the chol who marries a Bas Yisrael, why the daughter goes after the father, not because it's the father, is because that's the psul.
What happens if it was the other way? If the chalol married a kosher Yisrael?
Yeah.
So the child, let's say they have a
child.
If it's a girl, she can't marry a kohen because she's a bas halola.
She could.
Because after the father, then it's not after the father.
Yeah. Yeah. It says the Gemara. So that's the most question. The yes kedushin the whole kasha. It's not a problem. Why is that a problem? Because remember before we had a machlekes, we had an opinion called Rabbi Stoi ben Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Stoi ben Rabbi Yehuda said just a couple of days ago that the daughter kashes the mother. That he says that if a cholol marries a Bas Yisrael, he holds the daughter is kosher, and the mother is kosher as well. So so you don't say. So what does he clear from Rabbi Stoi? He holds the daughter takas kosher, allowed to marry a kohen. So there's no problem. So. So therefore, there's no problem. I mean, you go after the male. It's like a regular case of a Yisrael marrying. Excuse me. So okay. So he's allowed to marry a kohen and everything else. So the Gemara, how do Yisrael? What are the other way around? A Yisrael, this is what you're asking for. Yisrael marries a chalola, the yesh kedushin. If a Yisrael marries a chalola, the daughter is allowed to marry a kohen. Now you saw me. Yes, kedushin be'ein aveda and about her. Why don't we mention that?
So that's
you saw marrying a halal. It's a fourth case here, instead of a kite. All the way around. The daughter's allowed to. That's a most question. So why doesn't you're saying the Mishnah is limited when it says the word be'ezazu is coming to limit any other case? Here's a case here that with the halach is the sugar after the father. The Mishnah omits it. The Mishnah is excluding it. Why should the Mishnah excluding it? Says the Gemara. Tana kol mokum the reisha lasuye. So kol mokum of the reisha comes to include more cases where the Mishnah highlights. That's coming to include the case of a Yisrael marrying a halala where the daughter is mutter to a kohen, goes after the father. The daughter goes after the father. That's what kol mokum comes to include. Says the Gemara, the Netanya behedya. Why doesn't the Mishnah just include that case number 4? A Yisrael marrying a halala. Because it's very difficult to learn it. What should we say? We're trying to learn the flip side. So you have here, Yisrael marry a Kohenis Israelis. If you're going to add a Yisrael is able to marry a Chalala, then the flip side would be a Chalal marrying a Yisraelis, but the daughter's a problem. And not only that, a Kohen cannot marry a Chalala. How are you going to have the flip side? Here we have Yisrael Levi Kohen's allowed to marry Kohenis Levi Israelis. If you're going to add here a Yisrael can marry a Chalala, right? Then remember all 4 can marry all 4. Then it'll be a Kohen can marry a Chalala as well. It's not true. It's not true. So therefore it doesn't flow. Kohenis Levi Israelis the Chalala Shenisas, because this Chalal is allowed to marry Yisrael. Shenisas lekoin levi Yisrael v'chalola, but koin cannot marry a Chalola. Lekoin michazi, how can a koin marry? Therefore, we cannot mention. Even though Kol Makom says that this is another example where the child goes after the father, but it cannot be highlighted. Doesn't flow. Says the Gemara, but there's another case. That's another case where there's no Aveda and the child should go after the father, and yet the Mishnah doesn't mention it. Which one? There's a case of Rabba Baba Chana, a Mitzri Sheni. Remember, by a Mitzri, the third generation comes back. Mitzri Sheni Shenosa Mitzri Sheni. So the father is a Mitzri Sheni, which means if he would have married a Mitzri Shnia, the child will be the Shlishi of he can come back. Can come back, but what happened was he married a Mitzri, so she is self-converted. So he's the child of a convert, and she is a Yiddish. And Rabbi Yechon says, "The no Shlishi hava." We go after the father, and the child of Shlishi and is kosher. So Machlekes and then Amoraim, but that's what Rabbi Yechon passes. So why does the Mishnah include that? Another case where your father can go after the father. So we answer again. Tana, we learned Kol Makom Dereisha Lasliye. So Kol Makom Dereisha comes to include the case of Rabbi Yechon. So Kol Makom includes Rabbi Yechon. The Kol Makom now includes two cases. Includes the case of a Yisrael marrying a Chalola, where the daughter follows the father, and includes the case of Rabbi Yechon, where the father was a Mitzri Sheni and the mother was a Mitzri Shena, that that the child goes to the father, the Shlishi.
2 + 1 = 3.
Yeah, I said, but Abdimi, who argues, Rabdini, Rabdimi holds that you go after the Pogum Shabashneya, and whichever one is the worst. In this case, you go after the mother, and the child is a Sheni, is Tana. So why doesn't it mention it? According to him, Tana, Ezazu Lamutta. It's included with Ezazu. So according to Rabbi Yechanan, it's included in Kol Makom because the din is that the child goes after the father. According to Rabdimi, holds the child in this case does not go after the father, even though there's no Aveda, they're allowed to marry each other, but does not go after the father. That's included in Ezazu. So this is one case where it's included in Ezazu. And then we had, according to the second answer, top of the page, if we follow Rabbi Yossi, that says that that a ger can marry a mamzeres, Ezazu is coming to exclude. Ezazu is coming to exclude the ger marrying a mamzeres, even though there's no avedi there whatsoever. But the child that does not go after the father, the child there goes after the mother. Setting on further, there's another case that he also Ravin came. That was Rabbi Bachana. Ravin came and said in Rabbi Yechon, but umas halach achar hazocher. By goyim, generally we follow the male, and we'll see in the Gemara later. What do you mean by goyim? As we'll say, the 7 nations of Eretz Yisrael have to be put to death, and the other nations don't. So if a Kanani married someone from another nation, how do we follow? So we say that by a zocher, by goyim, we follow the zocher. If the father is a Kanani, he's a Kanani. If the father, and it has to be like Chayei Kol Neshama. If the father is a non-Kanani, then even though the mother is, doesn't matter. Then the child you can allow the child to live. But in this guy, if they converted, halech achar hapogum shebishmei. If they converted, you go after. If 2 goyim converted, you go after the worst one. Now, what do you mean? What do you mean worst one? 2 goyim converted, they converted. They're eating now. What do you mean the worst one? The Gemara will explain later what it's talking about. The Gemara like this. So when they converted, you go after the pogum, you're after the father. So how come our mission doesn't?
The other one's a Mitzri, so Mitzri has this whole thing of no Shlishi, so that's worse than a
So what do we pogum shabishnehem? It cannot be a Mitzri Sheni Mitzri edition because it seems like 2 different nations. We start with nations. So you might say you're talking about an Amoini who marries a Mitzri. By Amoini, you have a kula. If it's a girl, you can marry, you can convert straight away, and if it's a male, it can never ever be accepted ever. By a Mitzri, it doesn't make it a male or female. First 2 generations are us. So if an Amoini marries a Mitzri, then if it's a girl, you take the worst. If it's a girl, we'll treat like a Mitzri, and if it's a boy, we'll treat like an Amoini. And yeah, so Tana comes Ezazu lemutei comes along Ezazu to exclude this case. They were Megaya. We don't go after the father, we go after the Pogum Shebishmei. So the Gemara, hi, my. Before you answered me, the second answer was that we're following Rabbi Yossi that the gay marries Mamzeres, And you said, how come over there we don't go after the guy? But the Mishnah says we go after Upogum, and even the Mishnah doesn't mention it because when the Mishnah says the Ezazu comes to exclude that case. That's an exception. There's no Aveda, but yet we don't go after the father. Says the Gemara, I don't see how you can learn the Mishnah like Rabbi Yossi, and why not? Hi, Mike. If you learn the Mishnah Rabbi Yehudi, and Rabbi Yossi really makes no difference the first part here, then we understand the first case of the Mishnah, you have one word called Makkah comes to add cases, and you have Eidazu comes to exclude cases. So if you learn like Rabbi Yehuda and you learn Rabbi Yossi makes no difference, I understand the ratio well. My problem will be with a Sefer, the next case where you have again the words called Makkah Eidazu, and according to Rabbi Yossi, there's nothing to be excluded. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there is. And what is that? As follows. If you look at Yehuda, Kol Mokum the Reisha, the Kol Mokum that says in the Reisha comes to La Suye Yisrael Shnas Chalala. A Yisrael marries a Chalala. Over there we say that what? The daughter goes like the father, she's not a Chalal, she's going to marry a Kohen. That's not included in the mission, that's Kol Mokum. No Aveda, child goes after the father. And case number 2, it also includes Rabba Baba Chana. Rabba Baba Chana said that a Mitzi Sheni and the mother was a Mitzi Shena. The child is treated like the father, like he's a Shlishi, and he can go back and marry anybody he wants. That's included in Kol Makum. And that makes no difference. Everything makes sense. And Ezazu, what's coming Ezazu to exclude? Rav Dimi comes to exclude the case of Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi holds that a Mitzi what do you call it? A Mitzi, according to Dimi, makes sense. A Mitzi Sheni who marries a Mitzi Sheni, according to Dimi, you go after the Pogum Shibbush name. So that's there's no Aveda there, but you go after the Pogum. So according to Dimi, that's what Ezazu is coming to exclude. And even if you hold like Dimi, right? Even if you hold like Rabbi Chana, but for Ravin also comes to exclude Ezazu Ravin with 2 goyim convert. You go after the Pogum Shibbush name, which we'll see later. Toman Amoin and Amoin and Mitzvahs. Okay, but Kamokim the Sefer. Now we have the problem. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the next case is whenever there is an Aveda, you always go after the problem. Okay. Kamokim the Sefer. According to Rabbi Yehuda, is perfect. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda holds that a ger marries a mamzeres. There is an Aveda there. And who do we go after? Go after the problem. That's what the Kamok is coming to add. Even though the Mishnah doesn't use that as an example, but yet it's coming to add a case of a ger marrying a mamzeres. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there's a lab involved. The Kiddushin are affected. There's an Aveda because he holds a Gedim are considered Kol Hashem, and therefore an Aveda happened over here. And the child, what happens to the child? It goes after the Pogum, right? Which is exactly what case number 2 in the Mishnah is. The Mishnah doesn't highlight it. Okay, so it's included in Kol Makom. The example of the Mishnah is I'm on a Kohen Gadol, a Grushel Kohen Hedyed, but you could also say a Gedim Mamzeres. The problem is Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi holds that a Gedim is allowed to marry a Mamzeres. There's no Aveda. So apart from the few cases the Mishnah has, which is a kohen marrying a grusha, an aveda, and the child goes after after the pogum, what's the kamaka coming to add? What other case? Give me another example of an aveda happening, and the child goes after the pogum, not after the father. We don't have any other examples. What's the kamaka? According to Rabbi Yossi, we have a problem. According to Rabbi Yehuda, coming to include a ger marrying a mamzeres because he holds an aveda. He holds an aveda, so kamaka includes that. But according to Rabbi Yossi, we hold there's no aveda happening there. What's the Kalmak coming to include? Kalmak say, well, it's engaged less of that makes sense. Eli Amrid, Rabbi Yossi, Kalmak in the Reisha Kedamra, like we just said. Like we just said. Eli Kalmak in the Sefer Lasuyimai. Rabbi Yossi, what does Kalmak come to add? So the Gemara says very simply. And let me ask you a question. According to Rabbi Yehuda, any better? Okay, Kalmak comes to add Geish and marries Mazeres. What about Ezazu? Ezazu, the Gemara says, I'm on Kohen Gadol, and a Grush includes a Kohen Hedyed. But it's coming to exclude something. What are we excluding? Give me a case where there's an example of an Aveda, and we don't go after the Pogum. The time make Rabbi Yehuda, the Sefer Lamali, why is Ezazu according to Rabbi Yehuda? There's no, it doesn't come to exclude anything. So what are you going to tell me? The Mishnah is flowing, once you have, in the Reisha, Ezazu, so the Sefer you also put it in. Ella, I did a ton of Ezazu, ton of Sefer Ezazu. That's the only reason why. No, I'll say that. Yes, he expanded a bit. Hachinami, I did a ton of Reisha. It's not a kasha. Since the Reisha, we agree that Komaka comes to add a few cases. And Ezazu, the Reisha, where there's no Aveda, a few more cases that they go after the father. And Ezazu comes to exclude a case where you don't go after the father. And according to Rabbi Yossi, which case is that? Are you, again, marrying a Mamzedes, there's no Aveda there, and yet you don't go after the father? Or according to Rav Dimi, a Mitzri Sheni marrying a Mitzri Sheni's, or 2 goyim that convert, which we'll talk about in a minute, that you go after the Pogum Sheba name, that's what Ezazu comes to exclude. And that's it. And then the next case, when we talk about where there is an Avera happening and you go after the pogrom, the Mishnah uses the same language, Kol Makom and Ezazu. Not that it's coming to include anything or to exclude anything, just the language, the syntax. You agree that as far as Ezazu, there's a syntax. I'm taking it a step further. Kol Makom is also, that's the style of this Tana, or this Mishnah. Says the Gemara, let's analyze the case of Rabbi Yechon. And he said, while they're going, we go after the father. Once they become meeting after the pogrom, let's explain. By goyim, you go after the male. This guy who once they converted, pogrom's name though, whichever is more defective. My boom is halach achazach. First of all, we you go after the male. Kiddushin we learned. Menayin, how do you know if a foreigner Shabala Kananis married a Kananis and the child? What's the status of this child? Is this child considered like a Ben Kanan? And we have to put him to death or Bas Kanan? Or do we say the child is considered goes after the father and is a non-Kanani? And you let him live. So Rabbi Yechon said in this case, you go by Goyim, you go after Zocher. In this case, since the father is a non-Kanani, you can have it purchase him be'eved as an eved. Also from those people who live amongst you, it says toshavim. Now, generally, we say that the woman stays where she is, and it's the husband who moves in with the woman. So the toshavim refers to the mother. So she's a Kanani. So the the children of those who live by you. In other words, the mother is a Kanani. You can go ahead and buy from them. So that's how we know that if the father is from far away, the child is all right. Yochol, I would have thought I would have thought that also an Eved Shabal a Kananis. Supposed to be a Kananis, I think. Yeah, a Kanani. What about the other way around? If the father was a Kanani and the Eved, the Kananis, if the father was a Kanani and the father is a Kanani and the mother is a foreigner, how do we know then that the child is also you're not allowed to take him at all, you have to kill him? I would have thought the same thing. If I would have thought that the idea is a mixed marriage, the child is kosher. Not that the divorce is that you go after the father. How do I know that in this case, where the father is a Knani, that you're not allowed to retain the child? It says a pasuk, Asher halidu ba'artzachem, that gave birth in your land. Not if the mother is from far away and she moved in like a stranger in the land. The father's a local, and the mother came in as a stranger. So then the din is the child has the status of the father. So that's what Rabbi Yechon meant in the first part by Umas, you go after the father. Then he said, what do you mean by that? What do you mean? If a mitzvah marries Ammonis, my pogomika, what pogom? What's the pagam over here? That an Ammonis is if a mitzvah marries an Ammonis, she's a full-fledged Yid. You're allowed to. We're talking about a case here. Ammoni shenasa mitzvahs. A guy from Ammon who's not allowed to ever join the Jewish nation, the Kol, married a mitzvah. By mitzvahs makes no difference a boy or a girl. The first two generations are also the third generation is mutter. By Ammoni, it doesn't matter how many generations it's also. Now, and then they had a child. So if the child is Zachar, the child is Zachar, we'll treat him like Ben Ammon, and therefore he's also forever. It's Shadia Basrei Didei. We go after the father. But if it's a girl, then Shadia Basalida will say she's treated like a mitzi, and therefore she's a second generation. She cannot marry into the Yiddish nation. Only her child can. Okay. Next case in the Mishnah. Kol she'ein lo of Kiddushin. The next case is if there's no Kiddushin. If there's no Kiddushin, then we say that what? That you go after the pogrom. The third case is if there's no Kiddushin, that's Aroyas. Even though she can marry other people, there's Aroyas, the child is a mamzer. Says how do you know? How do you know that if there's no Kiddushin whatsoever, and she could marry other people, no, but it's Aroyas, case of your sister, your mother, your daughter, that's Aroyas. How do you know that the child is a mamzer? Oh my Rabbi Chiba Rabba, Rabbi Yechina, Rabbi Chiba Rabba, Rabbi Yechina, and Moti, but they bring him to Rabbi Yanai, and others say Rabbi Achabe, Rabbi Moti, but Mishra Beisagluli, oh my cross, says the Pasik, that if she leaves her husband, the Yotza, she leaves her husband, the Beisai, the Holcha, she went, Vahoisali Ish Achad, she married somebody who's not a relative. That means she, and the word Vahoisa is Havoya, which is Kedushin. In other words, when is Kedushin Chal, when is Kedushin effective? Only if she marries an Achad, not a relative. So that's how we learn that you can't, that Kedushin is not. So the first question is not how do you know the child of mom's, how do you know the Kedushin is not effective? How do you know by a Rayas? The other Avedas we say this Kedushin you still need a get. How do you know that if you marry your sister, you don't need a get? How do you know that the Kedushin is not effective at all? So the Gemara. Okay, so we're not asking a question, how do you know the child of mom's, we're asking a question, how do you know that there's a Kedushin is not effective? Even though in the Gemara Yibambas it's clearly the two are linked to each other. We learn the child of mamzer from other psukim, but we learn from the smichas of psukim. When one pasuk it talks about you shouldn't, the mother, the wife of your father, and then it says over there bite about a mamzer. So we compare the two. So, but the Gemara that clearly links the two. Mamzer is because you cannot have kedushin. However, according to Rabbi Akiva, the two are not linked. Rabbi Akiva holds that even by a lav, there's no that even by a lav the child is a mamzer, and yet Rabbi Akiva holds that the kedushin are valid. So this whole Gemara we learn now goes according to Rabbi Akiva holds that mamzer and the kedusha are not linked to each other. That means even where there is kedushin, you can produce a mamzer. If a kohen lives in sin with a divorcee, the child is a mamzer. So the question is, how do you know that then there's no kedushin when it comes to arayos? Maybe it's a lav and you have to give a get and so on and so forth. How do you know? So we say from the pasuk the yotzim at base of hoisel ishacher that when is it havoya, when is kedushin only if it's ishacher, not a relation. Only to others, not to your relative. Why don't we say ben? Now, who says across the board all relatives? The closest relative to this woman will be her son, and maybe the Torah is limiting that she cannot marry a son, and that there's no havoya, there's no kedushin by her son. But to all other karavim, to the sister, for example, maybe there is kedushin. So you want to know, Ben, I don't need a pasuk to teach me there's no kedushin by a son. Except the favorite pasuk, a person should not marry his mother, which means a mother should marry a son. So the Gemara is acher. So why do you know the pasuk must be to teach you something, not your son. In addition, we're expanding the range of people that there's no kedushin. I'm teaching what achedim, not to relatives. So the Gemara, how do you know? Maybe maybe both psukim. The pasuk which says lo yikach ish as ashes aviv is a isa for the son, and the pasuk is telling you there's no kedushin. Just because it's us, a kohen cannot marry a grushin, but there is kedushin there. So we need a second pasuk to tell you that there's no kedushin at all. In fact, for cat, because the only place where the Torah says that they're not allowed to marry, the Torah says lo yikach, don't have kedushin. He says by a son, and that's the closest relative. And then another pasuk, maybe referring to the son. Chatchila is an aveda. It comes the second pasuk tell you that not, and if you did it, there's no kedushin. So the Gemara, lechatchila, no, I don't need a pasuk to tell me that there's an aveda. Why not? Because ma'achois isha nafkin. That all arayis we can learn. You're not allowed to marry your wife's sister, and that is ma'achois isha. Marrying your wife's sister is a lesser of an aveda, punishment. You get chorus, and yet the Torah says like Sigdish, it says clearly you should marry. So Chayav and Mrs. Bezin, like your son, which is a chi of Mrs. Bezin, like Koshka, surely you're not allowed to marry. So when the Torah says la yikach by a ben, obviously that is redundant. Must be to tell you there's no kedushin. When the Torah tells you v'hoisel ish acher, it's talking about all other arayos, that there's no other kedushin. Any of the arayos has to be a non-relative. If you want to be v'hoisel, turn into a kedushin. Anybody know? So the aim, okay, you're right. By a son, you don't need it. But let's say, so since we're learning from Chaysisha says you're not allowed to marry. And then there's another possible. Maybe he's talking about that she should not, that the double thing here is about a Chaysisha, that a man is not allowed to marry his wife's sister. And that's what you learn from there. Says the Gemara, what? Why don't we just say the reason why you have two psukim is b'chlal? Just to tell you is that there's no kiddushin whereby by a chayis isha there's an aveda, and plus there's no kiddushin at all. Whenever you try to make kiddushin, there's no kiddushin at all by the sister. In other words, she marries somebody else. She shouldn't be marrying someone who married her sister. That she should not be marrying her brother-in-law. So the Gemara, Enoch and Ami, you're right. You're right. That the two psukim are one pasuk is that you're not allowed to marry your wife's sister. The second pasuk is that if she marries, her sister's husband, there's no kedushin. But ask her and ask her isha. Nu shayra even know. Okay, so no chayis. How do you know all of that, right? We compare it to that. Just like a chayis is an aveda, but like toss of kedushin, no kedushin. I said, but it says I've called she so we compare all our ayahs to our chayis. Says the Gemara, okay, I'll grant you that. We'll learn all our arayas and b'chayis that there's no kedushin, but there's two arayas that are, in a way, from a certain vantage point, are more lenient than all other arayas. And maybe there should be kedushin. And what is that? Okay, all arayas will compare to chayis. Ela eish is ish, a married woman, and eish is ach, and if you want to marry your brother-in-law when there's no children, equal mifrach. I can ask as follows: in the case with the wife's sister, shekain ein lehet mitzvah. While your wife is sorry, while your sister is alive with that person, there's never a mitzvah to marry her husband ever. So therefore, there's never a heter to that aveda. But the wife of a brother to marry the brother-in-law, since sometimes there's a heter if there's no children. So maybe even when there's no heter, maybe the kedusha is chal because it's a lenient avera because sometimes it's mutter. But in the place where there's a mitzvah, there's a heter. Yibum, exactly. So therefore, it's more lenient because sometimes that aveda is removed. So therefore, maybe if you make kedushin to such a way, if the brother-in-law make kedushin to her, maybe it's her while she's married to the brother. Maybe the kedushin an aveda, terrible aveda, but maybe she is mekudesh and he's a get.
The other way around also.
Wow.
Married his sister. Other sister dies, no?
But in a lifetime, you can never.
So you will be the same thing. It's not a lifetime with the brother. So when the brother dies.
True. But it's true. But the point is that the Isa, the Torah clearly says the Isa is Isha el achoisa lesikach. The Torah says while the sister's there, you cannot marry her. It doesn't say while the brother is there. If you have children, you cannot marry this woman even if the brother died. You cannot marry the brother's wife ever.
If he has to give her a get, then she's hostile to her original husband as Ochim.
Okay, that's a separate issue. But we're just saying it's true. Next case is H Nishnami. Equally, I can ask. As all these other royals, while the person who caused them the Isa is alive, there's no way that he can get out of it. He can give her a get while he's alive, give her a get, and she's free. So maybe it's a weaker Isa. Anyone who does any of these Vedikite and any of these abominations, the Nichrasu, they will get cut off. And that covers all that rayas. Compare all that rayas to the sister of wife. So too, all our rayas, there's no kedushin as well. That's how we know. So that way we know that the kedushin does not take effect. So I feel a need in Ami. So if so, you might ask a question, Anida, if you marry your wife while she's in a state of Anida, the Kedusha should be effective because there's an Issa Kodesh over there. What happens if you, there's an Issa Kodesh? Sorry?
That's only
But Kedusha that cannot turn into a beer, remember? So therefore, right now, this Kedusha cannot turn into beer. Not only shouldn't you be shouldn't be Kedusha, but also the child should be a Mamzer. Because an Isa Chorus if you're marrying her. Just like all these other Kedushin. What's that saying? Why did Abai say Hakol Moedim? Everyone agrees, but Baal Anida, even if you had relations with Anida. Vala Saita. Or a Saita, according to Rashi, Saita means after your wife was discovered, you say, live with her and you continue living with her. According to Taisus, it's talking about after you sent her away and then you took her back. She ain't a blood mamzer. The child's not a mamzer. Why the child mamzer? You just said that anyone that you know that is aroyah you're allowed to. On Machiski, on Makro, there's the pasuk clearly says, "V'tihi nedasa olav." The nedida is on him if he's with her, and he's tummy for 7 days if he has relations with her. It says olav afilu b'shas nidasa tehei b'havoy. Even when the nida, there's kedushin. There is kedushin. So I'm going to ask her. We'll just sorry. It talks about it. It becomes tummy. It says tehi. Tehi is from kedushin. Tehi is a lashon avoya. Says the Gemara, Mechdi ikala kushal nida. So you can compare all arayas to a nida where the kedushin is affected. Ikala kushal lachayishin. Then you have a choice to compare it to the wife's sister. My cousin makshal lachayis isha. Actually, why are you comparing it to the sister of the wife and making it also? Let's compare it to the nida and say the kedushin are effective. Kula v'chumra l'chumra makshin. Have a rule whenever you have a hekesh, you have a choice of going lenient or restricted. We always go the stricter one, and therefore we're comparing all our rois to chayis isha. That what, and by chayis isha we know that it's not effective because you have two psukim. One that you shouldn't take her, and the second one is that it's not effective. Same thing over here. Okay, we'll stop over here tomorrow.